This is Orsi, official old guy at oldguytalkstome.com, a podcast dedicated to helping older guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. It's for women too. Each week, I bring you a special guest to help you create that life that you imagine for yourself and those that you love. We talk anti-aging medicine, personal growth, relationships, and sex, vices, and other topics that many don't want to talk about but need to. Just because you're getting older doesn't mean you have to be old. Also, if you want to know 3 ways to get laid more frequently without begging, go to oldguytalks.com and opt in. When you do, you're going to get my informative video on 3 simple things you can do to get laid more frequently without begging, so you don't have to turn in your man card. And ladies, you may want your man to know these things, because I think you'll like it too. Additionally, you'll be notified weekly when a new podcast episode is ready for you to consume. Periodically, I will share with you other stuff that will help you create that life that you want for yourself and those that are important to you. Don't want to miss anything? Be sure to subscribe, share, and review this podcast. Did you know that there are 76 additives that have been approved by the FDA that can be added to wines? You want a wine with shit in it that may not be good for you? Well, there is an option for wines that have been produced naturally, organically, that have been tested, that have no sugar. And when they don't have any sugar, that means that they're ketosis and intermittent fasting friendly. These wines have been produced with a great deal of care on small farms and are available to you. How do you get them? Find out by going to www.oldguytalks.com/dry farms, all one word with an S, and find out more. And with your initial order, you can get a bottle for 1 penny. That's right, a bottle for 1 penny. And they taste great. They taste great. Don't wait, don't hesitate, don't procrastinate. Get those wines now. This is Orsi, official old guy at oldguytalkstome.com, podcast dedicated to helping older guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. That's right, folks, those that they love. And part of it has to do, with the military and the things going on and things that have been happening here in the last few months, especially with the drawdown and the leaving Afghanistan. And we're going to talk a little bit about what happens in terms of bring back remains and some other things in Afghanistan with retired Chief Master Sergeant Kevin D. James, who served as the superintendent of the 99th Force Support Squadron at Nellis Air Force Base. And he was the principal advisor to the commander on all strategic enlisted matters. He provided leadership, mentorship, and empowerment to about 800 military members. Kevin James entered the Air Force in July of 1992. Throughout his career, he served forces support related needs of the Air Force Total Force Team at the wing base and MAJCOM levels. What's that? Oh, you gotta have to say, what's MAJCOM? Nobody knows what that is.
That's Major Command.
Major Command. His assignments include bases in California, Virginia, and Washington. He also served at overseas locations in Turkey, Germany, Korea, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Iraq, Qatar, and Afghanistan. I bet you Afghanistan was your favorite.
It actually was.
Was it? Okay, we'll talk about that. Chief Master Sergeant has deployed in support of Operation Southern Watch, Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, Freedom Sentinel, and led as a Class 1 advisor for Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force in Afghanistan. And prior to assuming his current position, he was Chief Master Sergeant, served as Sustainment Superintendent, Air Mobility Command, Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington. Now, he has received numerous awards and decorations, and just a few of them mentioned here are the Afghanistan Campaign Medal with 2 bronze stars, 2 service stars, Iraq Campaign Medal with 1 bronze service star, and the Global War on Terrorism Exemplary Medal. There we go, folks. That's a lot. It's a lot of abbreviations for the old guy. So, Kevin, welcome to the program. Welcome to the program.
Thank you,
Royce. All right. So I always like to ask this question of my guests, and it's off topic before we get into talking about stuff. But what's the most important thing you've done today?
Today, actually, I woke up, made food for my family, baked a cake, made a tomahawk ribeye, made some fried rice. And then after that, I went and fixed a broken drip line. The drip line underneath my driveway had broke, so it was flooding on both sides of the driveway. So that is the most important thing I've done today, besides loving my family.
There you go. There you go. Loving your family's at the top of the list. So, so Kevin, just a while, but not too far back, there were 13 service members were killed in Afghanistan at the airport there.
Right.
And you had been involved in one of the things that one of your duties when you were in Afghanistan was transporting the remains of military personnel back here to the States. Tell us a little bit about first of all, what was your reaction to, you kind of, I bet you probably brought back memories of doing that. And what's the whole process? I mean, because there's a real dedicated process where a lot of respect is given to the remains of those military people.
Yeah, well, when it comes to the death for most of my teammates, it's not just specific to our brothers and sisters in arms. Like, absolutely, death is death, right? You know what I mean? Right. And so, you feel heartbreak when you run mortuary affairs downrange. You don't just deal with U.S. soldiers. You deal with anybody who has passed away or died on the base. Okay. So like I've done mortuary affairs, and we actually had an insurgent who died that we had to do a transfer back to the Iraqis.
Oh, right? Wow.
So yeah, it's just not just, providing dignified honors to our fallen service members, right? So that's one thing. In Afghanistan, my role was a little bit less because the Army, after I'd done mortuary affairs in Iraq, the Army took full control of mortuary affairs operations. However, in my career field, as you provided in my biography and what my background is, that is what we do: mortuary affairs, search and recovery, amongst many other things, right? So a lot of the big pieces in anything, right, is first of all, next kin notifications, right? So like go like this: you go on the news, you see something happen, right? You saw it. Right. So communication is huge. And I think social media has absolutely just made things really, really like awful. We have this society of this, like, knowledge is power, and guess what I know, and X, Y, and Z, right? So if you have casualties downrange, we don't know who they are. We just know 13 U.S. soldiers are killed, right? So what's the first thing? Control of information, right? Because you have family members at home who know they have family members downrange, and now it's like this, whoa, you're on your phones, like, hey, have you heard from so-and-so, X, Y, and Z? So that's the number one thing is you have to be very cognizant of your communications, right? So when that kind of stuff happens downrange, obviously, the number one thing is accountability. That's in life in general, accountability, right? So it's not just accountability of remains, it's also accountability of personal effects, accountability of personal effects in their room or their tent or wherever they stayed, right? So that process is pretty tedious, because you will have what's called a casualty collection point. You will have a mortuary, and that's where the process will usually begin, where you bring in the remains, you account for personal effects, you do what's called like a transfer of custody. So you own it, and then there's paperwork you fill out to hand it off, which is usually to like a load master, who is the guy who's responsible for the cargo in the plane. And then it just begins the process to transition areas, and then ultimately to the port mortuary in Dover, where they will do the full DNA tests. All right. So when you handle it, it's all believed to be you don't know who it is. You know what I mean? Even if you have an ID card that says who it is, you do not know who it is.
Sure.
Right. So that's the role downrange. And then obviously, if you've seen like the movie Taking Chance or anything like that, you can absolutely get an in-depth view of the process from Dover to escorts to home of records. Right. And there's a lot of things happening between there, right? Because once you actually identify who they are, then you have summary court officer roles, right, where they're getting the personal effects. Then you have family liaisons. You have a lot of roles where you've seen in the movies where you get that knock on the door,
right?
And so that's probably nothing that is surprising to the public, but there's a lot of things that we see in the movies that happen in real life that we don't invest a whole lot of emotion into, versus now, if you've been there and done that, there's some significant emotional impacts. A lot of people, a lot of my brothers and sisters who served downrange have felt, especially with the lack thereof of the exit strategy out of Afghanistan from most of our perspectives.
Yeah. So you say you mentioned something that some of the things that you don't expect. Can you give us an idea of some of those things?
Well, you can only train so much, right?
Yeah.
Like you can do driver's training, like in search and recovery, we'll throw like raw meat out. We'll throw raw meat out and you got to look for personal effects and you got to identify body parts, and like you don't take it that serious when it's just a rib from the butcher at the store,
Mm-hmm.
But then when you actually see a human being that's either burnt, shot, bled out, you experience what actual rigor mortis is, where you have to break stuff to get them to fit in the transfer case. That's tough. So you can only train up so much. And that's just the physical aspects of it. When you have teammates breaking down, especially if you have brothers or sisters who serve,
Mm-hmm.
that's someone's mom, dad, brother, sister. That's a human being. And it really puts perspective right in your face when you see that, because you're trying to manage the mission and get it done. But you also have to consider that you are also in danger of that happening to you. So imagine how that shifts your paradigm and perspective in the way you think, and why there are so many new norms for a person when it comes to PTSD and how they react, or how they have anxiety attacks, or how they become hypersensitive. Like for me, my son was born the same time I went to Iraq, and I experienced a life and death in crossing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I became very, very hypersensitive to my kids being in danger, to where even today I'm like, man, I've disabled them. I've kind of tried to shelter them from everything in fear that something will happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not until now that they're teens, like my daughter wanted to go to the park with a friend. And I'm like, ooh, even though me and you, when we were kids at much younger ages, we would disappear all day long.
Yeah, no one cares.
You know what I mean? And so, it has impacted a lot of people in a lot of different ways, so for me, it was very rough. The one thing that hit me the hardest when I first experienced it was the heartbreak of a family member living their life in the States, not knowing that their loved one has already been killed in action.
Mm-hmm.
That just never sat well with me.
Yeah, that's I can't remember what the name of the movie was. Kevin Bacon was in it. Is that the movie
That was Taking Chance.
Yeah, and that was I did not realize to the whole process, and I would encourage our listeners to watch that movie, because it was I was just sat there with my mouth open as to what the attention to detail in terms of and the respect with which the remains are handled. It was actually kind of an incredible movie.
Right.
Yeah.
That is absolutely one of the most it is probably, in my book, hands down the most honorable thing we can do in the service, to ensure that we treat our brothers and sisters with dignity and respect, and ensure they get home to their final place, where they're laid to rest, and ensure their families know that they were absolutely honored and taken care of. I mean, that's, like I said, I'm a dad of 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, it makes me nervous. My kids, when they say they want to join the military, I'm like, nah, I don't want you to, of course I would support them if they wanted to, but, service to our country comes at a cost, and we all volunteer to do these things. And we were at war. We were at war the whole time I was in the military.
Mm-hmm.
We went from Desert Shield to Desert Storm to Northern Watch and Southern Watch and Iraqi Freedoms and Enduring Freedoms. And you read off what I put in my bio. You know what I mean? Like, they only want you to have 2 pages of stuff, and I think you'd know in just under 30 years that I probably could have filled up 4 pages. So so I think, when you saw that, and you saw our soldiers, those Marines and the one Navy warriors, they were that bomb that go off and they died. I think we were already in turmoil from seeing the exit strategy, how it played out, and
it was horrible.
Yeah, there was already emotion with that. Then we're like, okay, wait a minute. Now we have U.S. military being killed again. And we're also still trying to figure out how to navigate just through wearing masks or not. And I want to say at the time, we also had a lot of stuff going on in the borders down south. So, I mean, it's social media, information flows at the speed of light. And it just, some of the biggest disappointments I had with that is some people knew. So people that supposedly know me and they're my friends, very few Very few reached out. You know what I mean? I know someone who reached out and who was the first person who reached out. But I'm like, yeah, I'm like, wow, you say I'm so close to you and you appreciate my service, but apparently you don't know me as well, or, other things are your priority. So it doesn't mean I dislike them. I think life goes fast and but things like that are, 20-year war is pretty significant, I think, to reach out to anyone who's close to you. Say, hey, how are you doing with this? And a lot of the vet support systems had come up and they were asking these questions because they knew there were a lot of military members who were already suffering in silence.
Oh yeah.
And
this just brings back the PTSD.
Yeah, it triggered it. Like I think I told you, Oris, when I saw you, I didn't think it was bothering me as much until I was on a work call. And, my dad, he turned the news on. And the image I saw was 2 children bloody with a mom crying. And then the next image was showing a mom throwing a baby over the fence to a military member. And it broke my heart, not just because of the desperation a mother would have. As a dad, like, I'm not tossing my kid over a wall, but then I can't help but put my if I put my feet in the boots of that military member who might be being told, you can't take that baby, because they're put in those situations. Can you imagine that if that military member on the wall is a father?
Yeah.
And he's seeing this desperation, the internal conflict he is having as a human. And I think, there's a lot of people on the outside who can watch the news and run their mouths, but they have no idea, I mean, and that's not exclusive. That's not a cookie cutter statement, but I know a lot of hua that I see on social media, but no dua behind it, and it's like, look, dude, just be quiet. That's the best thing you could do, is be quiet, reach out to those who served and say, hey, how you doing?
Yeah. There's a lot of bravado until you're faced with it. Oh, I'm going to do that. Oh yeah, I'll be there for you. I'll support you. And then, like, look around, like, where the hell are you?
They don't even realize some of the most basic things that they experience here. The environment, how hot, what I mean? Just think about the temperatures out there, and then think how moody we are when it's hot. And then think about the emotions, right? And then, you don't even gotta, let's not even split hairs and talk about the politics that are involved with this.
Sure.
What I mean? And people out there who are teammates for one mission, they don't always politically align. I mean, there's so many layers to it that, but anyways, I know we're deviating away.
No. And that's fine, Kevin. Cause you mentioned that Afghanistan was one of your favorite places to be stationed.
Yeah, well, that's because, when you deploy, you can be in very, very direct support, or you can just be in support, and you can be hundreds of thousands of miles away where you're doing more of the support from afar. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And so when you tend to be a little bit further away from my experiences, you're not necessarily dealing with rockets hitting the camp every day. So what do you think takes over? More of the private org crap, and let's go paint some rocks, and hey, the hee hee ha ha crap that, most people like, I don't want to deal with that stuff. And that's just my opinion. You know what I mean? That's just from my experience, to where when you're really, really in when you're really in the stuff, your focus is staying alive and being tedious and making sure you have your immediate action drills down. And when you hear the incoming, you hit the ground, because last time when someone didn't, it killed them. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Versus over here, it's like, hey, how come the pool is not open? So when I deploy, that means I'm taking something away from my family. So I want to be where the tip of the spear is. So that's why, so I did 2 back-to-backs to Afghanistan. The one there is an NDA. So, I can't really get into the details of it, but I was integrated with the Green Berets and SEALs and ran a lot of logistics for them. That's where the one Bronze Star came from. And the other time I was a squadron super, and my roles in mortuary affairs were a little bit more unique because I was the senior advisor to the commander, and we had some stuff happen. So when it happens to Air Force, it was more advising on what do we do to secure personal effects versus the actual nitty gritty stuff that I did in Iraq, if that makes sense.
Sure.
More hands-on stuff was the Army. Mine was more advising the commander and the commander of the fallen, like, hey, this is what we need to do to make sure the personal effects are accounted for and get to the port mortuary.
Yeah, that's I'm sure very sobering set of duties having to do that. It's I because as you said before, that's a life that's been extinguished, and probably surprised in a surprised way.
And it's not just that, that's someone's teammate.
Yeah.
These jokers like would want to fight you when you're telling them like, dude, you can't come in here. Like, it's a secured area. And remember, this isn't us like disagreeing over, like the sandwich at Subway. Like, you're talking about emotions, rockets hitting. We're all carrying loaded weapons. You know what I mean? And this is someone that was their battle buddy or their wingman, like may have saved their life 2 days before.
Sure.
And now they're gone. So it is a very, very emotional thing on several aspects of it. And I think for me, I've been told I know how to turn my emotions off like a light switch. And I say, well, I think that just comes with the territory of what you do. Well, for me, I turned my light switch off too long. And it wasn't until years later when my family started falling apart that I realized something was wrong, Even today, like there's a version of me that like you've never seen or none of the leadership people have seen, but there's another version of me, if provoked, is not a very nice guy, It's not that I like it. It's not that I like him. But I think that when you see that little stupid mistakes and inauthenticities, all those stuff come into the play of that stew that has resulted in people dying. It's important to make sure that when rockets hit the clamp and you do your PAR sweeps, right? So, PAR is post-attack reconnaissance. You have to go see if any UXOs have blown up. Right? You can't have Joe Dickhead out there who thinks it's time to be funny. Like, it's serious. Like, you can't use your radio within so many yards. You know what I mean? You have to block it off. Otherwise someone coming by and not paying attention, And I just think that, detail orientation for me is very, very serious. I'm very hyper about it. I'm very tedious when it comes to communication and timely communication. And those are just things that when you don't do that, I'm very annoyed. And trust me, I wasn't like that at one time, I was pretty relaxed, but imagine when you've been the chief and you've dealt with suicide and you've dealt with search and recovery of plane crashes and you're the one trying to explain to them the unexplainable.
Right.
So, everybody has their story. I believe that's what, I do with my podcast, everybody has a story and most, I say you can respect others. I can dismiss them like bullshit. You just choose to be a victim of your confirmation bias and play victim most times without wanting to shift your paradigm. So it's tough, and it definitely redefines us as warriors and families.
I imagine there's no way that it could not. If people say it doesn't, I think they'd be lying to themselves, and it really affects you. Kevin, you mentioned suicide. Now, there's lots of suicide with vets, and we hear about that all often. How prevalent is suicide of people that are actually active duty?
It's pretty high right now, right? So what are they saying? Like, the campaign that talks about like 22 suicides. There's a lot of private organizations and nonprofits out there that are out there just specifically to combat suicide.
Yeah. But I was talking about, not once somebody leaves the service, but actually when they're in active duty. Is that a big issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you have one, it's a big issue, right? Yeah. I wouldn't say that it's like, I would say because just one is too many. If you have 200 a year, right? Like do the math, right? I mean, I think when I retired, and don't mark my words, I don't want no Air Force people saying you got to fact check Kevin. So this is a wag, but I think we were close to 200 plus the year I retired, right? So you do the math and say, okay, well, if there's 300,000 in the military and you have 200, what percent is that? That's high. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I don't think necessarily, I don't want to say it's a problem. That's tough. I want to say it is a problem. but it's yes, it is an issue because one is too many. How about that?
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. Fair enough. Um, so I want to switch topics a little bit because you might know something about this more than I do, and I understand there might be some stuff. So now we're being told that we have to rely on over the horizon capabilities. And a politician said, and I thought that was kind of for reconnaissance. It's the way we are so far away. We're over the horizon, trying to get some sort of intelligence based on how we left. What is your perspective on the capabilities of over the horizon surveillance or intelligence?
All right, so I need your help. I need your help with this because I have not kept up. You know, I'm a dad of many kids. So
Oh, okay, yeah.
Priority, right?
Well,
So
then we can,
give me some context real
well,
quick.
people are talking about drones to keep track of what's going down on the ground.
Right.
And so, but our drones are, they used to be coming from within country, and now they're flying hours just to get on site.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say drone technology has absolutely been key, and that's been the shift for as far as reconnaissance and seeing. Yeah. I think if you do a SWOT analysis on it, I will say this about the Air Force: there's some very, let me say about the military, but most of the drones are their Air Force, right? So there's a lot of decision making that goes into it. Obviously, I would say one huge one will be safety, loss of life, and money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they will probably weigh and say, how much does it cost to send our intel folks in boots on ground versus have a plane fly over? And again, a SWOT analysis might say, hey, these are the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats. And then you have someone who just lays the gauntlet down and says, hey, I don't know. I don't know if I can really answer the question the way that you want to. I would say that drone technology has not necessarily let us down. It's been very beneficial. It reduces stressors on many other things that are impacted when you have to send people down range. Its effectiveness, not anywhere that I'm aware of, is negative in nature. Again, it worst case scenario, we rely a lot on artificial intelligence if there's any AI in it versus the fatigue of the operator flying it.
Sure.
And where they launch from. I think that question is loaded enough to say it depends if you're a Pepsi or a Coke guy. Does it make sense?
Well, yeah, I think though part of it also is the fact that drones give you a piece of the pie, and having assets on the ground also, which we don't have anymore, essentially. Right. And now, did you work when in your position in Afghanistan and Iraq? Did you work with locals?
Yeah. We did. Yeah, locals are kind of a key integrator for support, right? And you tend to get to those, so this is one of the rationales behind it. Look, let's face it, we're not getting richer as a nation, right? And defense budgets don't usually get more robust. And end strength usually shrinks, and that is usually directly impacted to money, right? So when I say end strength, it means manpower.
Right.
So we've never like in 20 years, we were fighting a lot of wars, right? We still have presence in the Pacific. Right. We still have, we had presence in Europe, we're spread very thin. Right. And so when the money becomes an issue, then you have to look at what assets you have available and you have to find workarounds. Right. So, yeah, so they will hire local nationals. That's how they're referred to as LNs to do certain duties that are like janitorial, cleanup, trash and stuff like that. And, sometimes there is a tie into coin operations, counterinsurgency, right? To where you're trying to build that relationship. Sure. In the area. Yeah. So yeah, we did. I mean, I never had issues with them. Very good people, very friendly, very nice. But look, blue on green was one of the biggest threats we experienced because Afghan military would turn and shoot their military counterpart who trained them up. Right. So, when you're down there, like you are literally trained to say, look, this is the mindset we're given. Plan to kill anyone that you think is your friend.
That's true. It's sobering. But
You know what I mean? Like they're like, don't think because they're being friendly to you that there's no hidden agenda. These cells, we've learned, will sit for 30 years, being your neighbor, you know, and stuff like that. And, you know, like I said, from my world, you take that serious. You hopefully do. And the person who doesn't will have a very life-changing experience. And even the person who was super vigilant about it, still, you know what I mean? No one's immune to it. I mean, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But yeah, you absolutely work with some local nationals when you're downrange.
No.
I did in Afghanistan. I did not though in Iraq.
Okay. Well, okay. All right. Well, Kevin, that's I really appreciate your perspective on the bring back the remains of military people that have fallen in combat and what happens in the whole process, because it's a great you know, it's, the honor that's shown, the respect is very important, and it's a very serious thing that you have people have to deal with and families have to deal with, and then the aftermath and all that. So it's good that it starts out with a lot of respect at the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh,
I'm gonna
all
tell
right.
you, some of the best people I worked with was in those roles. And I'm actually because of social media, one of the positives of social media is I was able to stay connected with several of them to date.
Okay, cool. So Kevin, you have a podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast and where people can find it and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I have a podcast, Kicking It with KJ, all one word, and it's Kicking It with KJ. I'll have a lot of folks that'll come online and be like, "Hey, I can't find you." I'm like, "It ain't like kicking like chicken; it's kicking like licking." So, yeah, I started doing that because my dream always was to be like a talk show host, and so they know if I have that kind of flair, and you know, a podcast, you know, seemed like a pretty cool opportunity to just do a little something, and I enjoy it. I got to be the first to or say, I mean, we've talked a lot, right? I mean, I've talked to you a lot and stuff about it, and I took a break over the summer for a few reasons. One, because the damn heat. My studio's in my garage, right?
Oh, okay.
I tried to do an interview in there, and I spent more time sweating. I sweat more in there than I did on a treadmill. But two, I think you'll know, right? And so I think, you know, when I retired from the Air Force, I started a new career. I started this podcast. I was dealing with a lot of stuff in life. When I say dealing with a lot of stuff, you know, I had the birth of a, you know, baby number 6.
Right. Yes.
COVID's going on, and you have to manage your demons. And so sometimes you think something is, it doesn't necessarily mean it isn't, right? So go back to when I said, you know, it was nice when like Oksana reached out to me and said, "Hey, how you doing?" Based on that, right? I'm like, wow, you're the first person who's actually asked me. That equates to me, you actually give a shit. But the opposite of that is me assuming that nobody else gave a shit. And that's not true. So I had to navigate through some what I felt like was a support, lack of support. How come you don't share this? You know, if you don't want to share, that's fine, but give me feedback. And I felt like I just needed to take a pause, and I came out a lot more clear, you know, realizing that, you know, people are just busy. Most people, if I ask for help, they'll help. But you know, you know, and I think I needed an attitude adjustment. And so the pause and taking a knee was good. So going back to the question that you asked, right? Yep. Kicking It with KJ, people, passion, and strength, right? Really at the end of the day, it's not just military. It can be anything, anyone wants to talk about. You know, we had created Behind the Ranks, and we'd created Rusty's Garage with 2 sub shows underneath it. And we all kind of took a pause. I think as a direct reflection of me taking a pause, they kind of just said, okay, I don't think Kevin wants to do all this editing and stuff. So yeah, I'd love for people to join me on Instagram. It's the same thing. It's Kicking with KJ, one word with an underscore at the end. And you'll find that I filled in the gaps of no podcast with reels and doing things with my son and my family.
Okay, cool.
Asking my parents.
And we'll put that in the show notes so people can find it there pretty easily. All right. Well, Kevin, thanks for coming on the program.
Oris, thank you for having me.
All right. This is Oris, the official old guy at oldguytalkstome.com. Until next time. But before that, I want you to do several things. One, I want you to rate. I want you to review, and I want you to share. And if you want to give me a bad review, I love you, man. I love my trolls. I feed my trolls on a regular basis. So do that. Do that. Until next time.
Thanks for joining me on this podcast. If you like what you heard and learned, then be sure to do 3 things. 1, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. 2, share this with someone who may need to hear it also, and it may be your significant other. And 3, review it. Give me a good review. If you didn't like it, give me a bad review. I don't care. Just review me. And be sure to get my free video on 3 ways to get laid more frequently without begging. Opt in at oldguytalks.com. Don't be that guy that just takes in the information. Take action. Without action, you're not going to get the results you want.